No, that was exciting. Hello, everyone. Vice Chair Guyton presiding for Chair Corman. And today, welcome to ENT. We have a different type of briefing. It is not energy. It is about transportation, which is something we always get really excited about in this committee. I am going to call up Mr. Scott and Ms. Arnold, if you're with us, to begin our briefing. First, we have Mr. Scott, who is Acting Vice President of Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, and then we will hear from Holly Arnold, MTA, and then we will have questions from the members. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. Again, Charlie Scott with Metro. Pleased to be here today to provide a brief update on everything Metro, and then happy to hear what Holly has to share about everything MTA as well. So just kind of what I'll be going over, some of our accomplishments, achievements from last year, where we stand in terms of working with the region on our DMV Moves initiative to become a world-class transit network in the DMV, and then also next steps that we're seeking both in Richmond, Annapolis, and the District of Columbia this calendar year. So I'm not going to go over each one of these highlights and metrics for Metro, but one I do want to highlight, top left corner, Agency of the Year. This is a recognition that Metro received from the American Public Transportation Association. I think at Metro, the team feels really good about the service we're providing. I think our customers are responding as well, but it's always good to have that validation and recognition from our peers across the country. And this is actually the first time that Metro has won this award in 28 years. So definitely a nice achievement for the agency. Another one I want to highlight on this page, actually it's on here twice, is our low-income fare program for all residents of Maryland, DC, Virginia who are SNAP eligible. We have a program that allows them to receive 50% off of their Metro bus and Metro rail fares. And we've been working on that for about 2 years now. So we now have 16,000 residents across the region signed up for that. And our residents who are part of that program have saved $3 million on their Metro fares. And also want to recognize in the audience, Jonathan Rogers from MDOT, Washington Suburban Transit Commission office. We've been working closely with Jonathan to identify opportunities to expand participation in that program, especially in Montgomery and Prince George's counties. So just highlighting some of the things that we're doing at Metro. Very excited about the transit-oriented development, joint development program that we have at Metro. And I've really seen a great acceleration in what we are doing across the region to promote development on Metro-owned properties. This slide gives you a snapshot of some of our recent successes and efforts. So starting in the middle there, we have Twin Brook. We had a compact public hearing to have public feedback on what we want to envision for that station. West Falls Church, we are regional, so there is a highlight from across the river in Virginia. That's a pretty exciting project. And then the other three are all Maryland projects as well. New Carrollton, that's actually a senior housing part of a larger development there. We also have senior housing at Grosvenor that just broke ground in December. And then last month at Capitol Heights, we were pleased to announce our selected developer for our future development at that station. So really see great initiative from our real estate office and also from the development community seeking to expand development at our Metro stations. We're also focused on safety and security. I think when our general manager, Randy Clark, came on board a few years ago, that was one of the first things he heard from employees at Metro and also from our customers, that people did not feel safe in the Metro system. Fare evasion was rampant at the time, and just people did not feel as safe and secure riding the system. So definitely we've seen a great reduction in fare evasion, 82% reduction on the rail system, and also the system is more secure from a reliability standpoint. About 10 years ago, it was quite frequent to have smoke and fire incidents in the rail system. As you can see from that chart on the right-hand side, the number of our smoke and fire incidents has dropped precipitously as we've worked hard to reinvest in the rail system. Also, at Metro, we benchmark ourselves across peers in the industry. So on these graphs, you want to be at or near the bottom of these graphs because these graphs depict the number of incidents that our peer agencies have these types of system failures or incidents happening in their system. So again, rail collisions, derailments, rail customer injuries, Metro has tracked at the bottom of our peer systems. And again, the bottom is good in this case because we want to have the lowest number possible for these metrics. Similar for bus and for Metro Access, our injury rates and collisions and injuries for Metro Access customers, we also track near the best in the industry on these metrics as well. So definitely proud of the work that our teams are doing to invest in the safety culture across the agency. And again, this has resulted in the lowest crime rate in Metro history. So this is for Part 1 crimes in the system. We ended calendar year 2025 at the lowest rate that we've ever recorded. So definitely proud of those accomplishments. And again, this is a key metric that our customers care about considerably. So some highlights from last year, Metro Rail ridership. We averaged 469,000 per weekday. Metro Bus about 375,000 and almost 9,000 on our paratransit service. So that totaled for the year almost 270 million trips. And we actually had 12 days last year where we exceeded 1 million riders. So it was that was our first year since COVID where we crossed that benchmark. So we're definitely proud of the continued ridership growth on both bus and rail. And then a couple other things that we've achieved in last year. For the first time since 2009, we've returned to automatic train operations on all lines for the Metro Rail system. Similar to what MTA launched a few years ago, we completely reimagined our bus network for the first time in the 52-year history of the bus network. So we did that in July of this past summer. We also implemented Tap Ride Go, which is a contactless way to pay with your credit card on the bus and rail system, and we hope to be expanding that to our parking facilities later this year. And then here in Maryland, and across the region, our riders are definitely responding to the improved service and the more safe and secure system that we're providing. So in this graph, I've highlighted the growth in ridership on the rail system for Maryland riders. The most recent month that we have is December of 2025. So you can see that on the far right, 65,000 daily trips. And if you go back 3 years, you can see that that number had been 37,000. So definitely a marked increase in our ridership over the last 3 years on the rail system. And then this gets to the point where our job is not quite done. So as I think Chair Corman and others have highlighted across the region, the success that we're realizing today is largely thanks to the 2018 dedicated funding legislation that was approved here in Annapolis, in Richmond, and the District of Columbia that enabled us to increase our capital program to deliver the more safe, secure system that we have today. So the bonding that we're able to implement based on that 2018 capital funding has allowed us to have a capital program averaging about $2.2 billion a year. That bond capacity runs out in FY29. So the resulting decrease in our bond capacity causes this reduction in our current CIP, as you can see on this chart. So we drop about $800 million. So I think most people would understand that we cannot sustain the level of investment in our system if we have to continue with this level of funding in our CIP. So about 18 months ago, we started a DMV Moves initiative across the region, looking at how the region, both Metro, but also MARC, VRE, local transit systems can further improve and be world-class transit that the region deserves. And what we focused on is rail modernization on the Metro rail system, and then also looking at bus priority treatment that we can expand across the region, recognizing again that we provide bus service to about almost 400,000 riders a day, so they also deserve great transit in the system. So I'm going to skip over the next couple slides, but happy to come back to these. But again, these kind of get into what would be involved in rail signal optimization. We're using the same technology that we opened with in 1976, and it's getting harder and harder to replace the signaling system that we have in the system. So similar to what MTA has done in Baltimore, we want to go towards computer-based train control, which is what transit agencies are leaning on these days to have a much more robust communication system. Also allows increased train frequency as trains are communicating with each other, and you can have more frequent trains in the system. For bus priority, you can see here on the map, generally the identified corridors from the DMV moves process across the region where we've identified opportunities to have our buses run more efficiently, more quickly. It saves us money because we get to use fewer buses to get through these congested corridors, and of course it's also a benefit for our riders as well. So then again, looking at the capital needs of the metro system, the green bar at the bottom there shows kind of where we are today, and then where we would project to be if we received this funding from Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So we still have some backlog in terms of a state of good repair backlog, and we think we can manage with that. We think that even though we have a backlog today, we're still able to provide good service to the region. The orange bar at the top shows what would happen if we don't receive the funding, and we think that starting in a few years, the backlog would start increasing, and of course, with that increase in state of good repair backlog, the service would then begin to degrade. So the ask of Maryland and of the entire region is to come together to identify funding to support improved funding in our CIP. Again, that CIP debt limit is reached in FY29. So again, Chair Corman is here now. Appreciate the legislation that he's put forward, and hope that Maryland, Virginia, and DC will follow suit to approve that funding levels. And with that, I'll, I think, turn to Administrator Arnold, and then we'll take questions. With that.
Okay, there we go. All right, good afternoon. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, thanks for having us today. For the record, my name's Holly Arnold. I'm the administrator at the Maryland Transit Administration, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Liz Gordon, Assistant Deputy Administrator for Planning and Programming.
And we want to thank you guys for allowing us to cancel, unfortunately, the tour that you had planned for August when we were kind of in the middle of the cybersecurity incident. Some of the updates that we're going to provide today cover the items that we were going to cover during that tour, so we appreciate the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to start similar to WMATA with some of the recent accomplishments. Thank you to the General Assembly and the Moore-Miller administration for the funding in last year's budget. Because of that, we're able to advance a number of capital investments across the system. The biggest one for us right now is the launch of our light rail modernization program. We are now in market for the majority of that program, a lot of interest from the industry, and we are working as fast as we can to advance that project so that we can really invest for the first time since the system was built into improving it. On the Purple Line side, construction is 87% complete. We are on track to lay the final piece of track in Montgomery County later this spring, and ultimately finish a lot of the major civil construction this year so that we can begin testing next year. So it is a huge amount of progress that we've been able to make over the past couple of years on that project. And then again, up in Baltimore, our new Metro rail cars entered revenue service. So again, those investments that we're making over time, these major investments in the system, are continuing to pay off. In addition to that, we are planning for the future. Liz will go over some of those, but we have our Mark Growth and Transformation Plan. We put out our Be More Bus Plan, updated the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, and a number of other initiatives to make sure that we are kind of ready to advance these initiatives throughout the region. We're also prioritizing public safety. Similar to WMATA, I think we got a lot of feedback from our riders and our operators that they didn't feel safe on the system. So we've been really investing in making sure that everyone feels safe when they ride. So some of our safety initiatives include implementing our rider code of conduct and exclusion policy. And again, thank you to the General Assembly for the bill that allowed us to do that. I know our operators in particular definitely feel more supported by having that option there. We also launched the CSAY app. So it's an app on your phone where you can very discreetly report when something's happening, and police are able to directly respond. In partnership with Baltimore City, we've now have naloxone available at all of our metro stations. We are offering training to our operators who want to take it, and we're looking to see if we can expand that as well for, again, just having that life-saving opportunity available at our system. And we have received national recognition for bus emergency management by APTA. We're also on the crime reduction. We did see 50% reduction in our Part 1 crimes over the past decade. So we continue to see MTA police doing an excellent job of keeping crime off of the system. 0 homicides or rapes on the system in 2025. Again, the police are saving lives as well with Narcan, over 200 live saves. And our clearance rates continue to be incredibly high in the high 70s and 80s percent as we, again, make sure that the crime is staying off of our system. We're looking at our fare policy as well. We want to make it easier to use the system. And so we updated our fare policy this past year. Children 12 and under are now able to ride free. Baltimore City school students are able to ride at any time. Previously, it was limited to just kind of morning and afternoon to get them to and from school, but we heard a lot of feedback that they couldn't get home from practice or from plays or jobs. And so now they're able to ride anytime with their ID. We also extended our free transfer window from 90 minutes to 2 hours to allow people more time to travel. And just recently, we launched our MARC Student Saver program, which replaces an old program that we had on our MARC system. We're now running it in-house, and it's a better discount than it was previously. Within the first 4 days, we had over 230 signups, so it's definitely something that folks were interested in, and we're excited to make sure that they have access to that really fantastic regional asset. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to take it here.
Okay, so another focus of ours over the past several years has been improving our budget performance on both the operating and capital side. On the operating side, that's really been about managing overtime and budgetary tracking, and that has landed us within 0.2% of our spending plan. And on the capital side, that's really been about improving our capital delivery so that we can be a good investment in the sense that all capital money that is appropriated to us is spent improving transit. And last year we had really good performance. We closed fiscal 25 at 97% of our final CTP allocation. That's the one. Great. In addition to the budget performance, we are, of course, planning for the future. One aspect of that is the MARC Growth and Transformation Plan, which does lay out that long-term vision for expanded service. But there are near-term investments that really unlock additional potential service. There's a lot on here, but in the interest of time, I do want to draw attention to the improvements at Martin's State Airport and the Martin's Maintenance Yard. That's really important because that potentially unlocks additional service in the near term. Additionally, we did complete the feasibility study for third track segments on the Brunswick line, which similarly, those segments would unlock future service. In terms of our capital needs inventory, we published last summer the update to the capital needs inventory, which we do every 3 years. And this just shows the amount of funding that we expect to receive and compares that to our state of good repair needs. Something of note, again, to reiterate the gratitude for the additional funding in the last legislative cycle. Over the 6-year program period, 90% of MTA's state of good repair needs were met, which is great. However, we do expect needs to expand over coming years as assets reach the end of their useful life. And so our average annual need over the 10-year plan, CNI plan period is $800 million in the 2026 to 2030 range, and then $1.2 billion annually from 2031 to 2035. On the bus side, I know the intent was to do a tour, so we'll talk a little bit about the Eastern facility. Another funded project last session was a really significant state of good repair effort at our Eastern facility. The Eastern facility is one of our 4 bus divisions. It's really core to how we do our operations. It was also built in the 1930s and needs a little bit of help and repair. And it is also operating at 103% of its capacity. So that rehabilitation and structural repair will be really important to our ability to operate efficiently out of there and also to the employee experience there. On the future side for bus, we are, of course, looking at battery electric zero-emission vehicles. And so the first 7 ZEBs entered revenue service in 2024, and we expect that we'll be purchasing additional buses for a total of 37 ZEBs by 2027. The big vision for the future on the bus side is the Be More Bus plan, which basically asked the question of if we were to receive resources for a 5th bus division, what should we allocate those resources to? What should the vision be? And so with both extensive public outreach and data, we did form a mostly frequency-based expansion vision through the Be More Bus Plan.
Thank you, Liz. Back to the rail side, I mentioned earlier our investment in replacing our 40-plus-year-old Metro rail cars and signal system. The new cars, we've received the first several of them, and we were able to put the first 3 married pairs into revenue service early January. We're also investing in the state-of-the-art communications-based train control system that was mentioned previously that will allow our trains to operate in automatic train operation, which is something that we haven't had the ability to do. So we are continuing to test and roll that out, and will be throughout really 2026 and into 2027. We're also continuing on the Metro side. Again, there's a huge investment that has been made into our Metro system and making sure that it maintains in a state of good repair. So we're focused on structural repairs, really kind of basic behind the scenes stuff of making sure the concrete isn't spalling, fixing a lot of drainage issues, leaning in on escalator replacements, elevator replacements, and those are all funded in the current CTP. Again, thank you to the funding from last session. On the light rail side, I mentioned the light rail modernization program. This is fully funded, thank you to the funding from last year. It's a $1.4 billion program of investment. It replaces all of our vehicles, signal systems, makes adjustments at every station, does some track rehab, and invests in our maintenance facilities. It is the first major investment that we have done in the light rail system since it was built in the 90s. So it's really exciting for the agency. We do have kind of 5 tranches that this is broken up into. And again, we are moving really fast. We are in market for the vehicles and train control, stations and track upgrades, and the traction power substations. And we are getting ready to advertise shortly for the Cromwell maintenance facility. So we're moving quickly to make sure that we can advance that with the dollars that we've been provided. So again, kind of just rounding up our priorities here is making sure that we have the capacity to spend the dollars that have been given to us, building on that recent momentum. I think we're on a good track to make sure that we can get the system into a state of good repair and get to performing better. We're also monitoring the impact of the late August cybersecurity incident, which did have some impact on our ability to kind of move programs forward, as well as the October federal DBE interim final rule. And we're advancing our critical work and adapting as much as we can. And safety critical continues to be the name of the game, and so we want to make sure that we are continuing to focus on that. And that's all we've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you all. I apologize for being late. You know this is not one I want to miss 1 second of, so you know it must have been serious. Question, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, I have a question for Mr. Scott, and then I have a couple of questions for Ms. Arnold. Mr. Scott, you talked about congratulations on the 65,000 riders in December, and that trajectory is going up. That's great work. My question is just, how does that compare to like peak numbers prior to COVID? Like, are we in the ballpark now in terms of ridership, or do we still have a ways to go?
On the bus system, we are at close to 100% of our pre-COVID ridership. On the rail system, we are still in between 70, 80% of our pre-COVID ridership. So good news, I guess, if there's good news in that, is that we still have plenty of capacity to welcome more riders every day. And we've also seen a change in pattern of ridership. So we don't have the same level of AM, PM peak that we have, and we're definitely serving more riders during the middle of the day, weekends, late night activities. So we're definitely seeing a change also in the type of ridership that we're experiencing today.
Okay, great, thank you. And then for Ms. Arnold, I have a couple of questions. One is, on your feasibility study for the third rail in the Brunswick line, I assume that that's with an eye toward expanding service, which we're always fighting. I mean, the only transit really in my district is MARC. And so, and it's the Brunswick line. And so I assume the eye is toward expanding Brunswick line service. Do you have any ballpark timeline in terms of when we think we can see that actual expansion?
I'll start and I'll look at Liz if I need any help here. So we do see the Brunswick line as, I think, the highest opportunity for expansion on the MARC system. There's a lot of need, there's a lot of demand. for midday evening service that we want to invest in. So right now the focus is on the Silver Spring Turnback, which is one of the things that was identified in the Brunswick Line study as opening up some capacity. So we're focusing on advancing that now. We have funding for a 30% design, and we're going to continue to pursue federal opportunities and other opportunities for additional funding for that.
But it's a ways out, is what I'm hearing you say. Okay.
Ultimately, yes, I mean, it does depend on the funding agreement from CSX and moving it forward.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question about MTA, well, Mark specifically, and the Purple Line, is I know that there is an arrangement, I believe, this may be for both of you, there's an arrangement with VRE with respect to Metro, and I wondered, are we looking at something similar for Mark and or the Purple Line?
I assume you're referring to fares?
Fares, yes, I am. I'm sorry. I meant, fare arrangement.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, so we're still in discussions. MTA is working on our fare policy for the Purple Line, and we're looking at a bunch of different options. We've had some early discussions with WMATA. I think we need to continue to advance those.
And what about Mark?
At this point, we haven't had those discussions. We've used to do cross-honoring, I think, on like inclement weather days, but we have moved away from that, and so I think we need to reopen that.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I would really, that would be very helpful, I think, to the people in my district who commute. And I think also for some of the people, in Hagerstown or Frederick County, who are more and more likely to come into the DC region, it would be very helpful to have a fair relationship there, I think, for people. Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify though, like 7 transportation secretaries ago, I was told that the Smart Trip card would work on the Purple Line. That's still the case, right?
Yes, we will be compatible with the WMATA system, including the Tap Ride Go that Mr. Scott mentioned.
Awesome, thank you. Delegate Vice Chair Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. All right. My first question is congratulations. You all actually reported a whole lot of improvement and particularly safety metrics that we recognize, and I know that all of our constituents appreciate as well. And I wondered if you could take a moment to just be a little bit more specific about what initiatives you feel like led to those improvements so that, we can all learn from those as we move forward.
Sure.
You want to go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, on the MTA side, we continue to focus on the kind of smart policing that our team does. They use a lot of data to determine where to deploy. We have cameras that we use, again, that kind of help us be that force multiplier. We've also focused on kind of where we were seeing the most complaints, and honestly on our metro system. So our police kind of really surged on the metro side. We have more presence there in a way that we didn't previously, both riding the system and at stations, which helps with people feeling safer. Beyond that, I think it is the partnerships that we have. We have a fantastic partnership. I could start naming police, but it's really everyone in the region who assists with that. And so it's, I think, kind of a combination of both of those. We're also leaning in a bit harder on the fare enforcement. During COVID, I think all transit agencies really across the country got very lax with that. And one of the things that we've seen is that not everyone, I think Randy said this as well, but like not everyone who evades fares is committing crimes, but a lot of people who evade crimes are also committing crimes. And so by leaning in there and keeping some of those folks off the system, we think that has helped as well.
And then very similar on the policing and fare enforcement front. Only other thing I'll add is internally our safety management system and trying to promote a just culture, making sure that our employees feel safe, secure, reporting anything that they see in the system that would be unsafe for them to be operating, and making sure that there's no penalty for those employees to be forthright and forthcoming, reporting anything to management. So I think getting that culture change throughout the metro system has really helped.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate that answer and the significant improvements that we're hearing about. And I have to just shout out Ms. Arnold because I am MTA, my district's MTA, and you've always been so incredibly responsive every time we've had an issue. And so you may know what I'm going to ask about, which is you had some wonderful initiatives and programs that you discussed, including the half fare price for people on SNAP. And I think that's amazing work. I did not hear anything about MTA mobility, disability, or access. Can you speak to that a little bit and how that program is evolving, plans for improvement? I do have a bill on this subject, so I'm not going to litigate that here. We'll do that then. But tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we had a short period of time and so much to talk about. Mobility ridership continues to grow, and we're continuing to focus on that across the agency. For our long-term growth and plans that we're looking at there, one of the biggest things that we're looking at to improve service is basically replacing our scheduling software. We've heard from our employees that it's clunky, and we've heard from riders that it's clunky, and so we want to look at better ways that we can provide that software so that people can book trips more seamlessly on mobile, and then it's better for us behind the scenes. I do want to shout out the work that the mobility team has done with very few exceptions, primarily right after the cyber incident. We have maintained above a 92% on-time performance for over the past year. Since we did have that kind of bump right after the cybersecurity incident, we've been above 95. Even this past week with the snow incident, the team has not had any injuries, slips, or falls, and has maintained above a 90% on-time performance. So we're going to continue to invest. We do have funding for vehicles. So we have, I think it's about 100 vehicles that we're going to be replacing, and we're continuing to make sure that we're investing in that system.
Is there a timeline for that software improvement?
We had hoped to be in market already, and then unfortunately the cyber incident kind of pushed us back, but the goal is in the first half of this year to be in market. We do anticipate that it will be a little bit of a longer term switch, just because we want to make sure that everyone's trained or it's ready to go. Like, the absolute worst thing to happen is we switch software and then the system falls apart. So we're going to do a longer kind of mobilization and training period to make sure that when we flip the switch, that we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you for that, and I'm sure we'll talk more.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, may I have 2 questions? Thank you. Administrator Arnold and team, everybody, it's good to see you. I get excited when we start talking about Martin State Airport, so I was very excited to see that in the presentation. Could you just give a little bit more depth as to where that is, what's happening on the project?
Yeah, so we have actually 2 projects that we're doing at Martin State right now. So the first that Liz mentioned is the expansion of the maintenance facility there. So we're adding 2 additional storage tracks. And again, storage tracks sound very boring, but storage helps us to get out of Penn Station, and then we're out of the way of Amtrak and we can run more service. So it kicked off this past fall. The team is, advancing, moving forward. We anticipate like major construction this year and then wrapping up next year. Beyond that, the other project that we're working on there is the 30% design for making Martin State ADA accessible. So we did receive a grant for that and are advancing it. I will say the overall cost of that project is pretty high. We're working with Amtrak on like what that could look like. Some of the requirements we think are a little crazy, but it's Amtrak, so we're still working through that. But that is, one of the only stations on the Northeast Corridor that has the at-grade crossing, or pedestrian crossing in particular. So we're definitely interested in how we can advance and move that forward.
Fantastic. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. My other question is in the exact same area. Recognize this is Amtrak, but I thought you might be able to help shed some light. So I'd recently heard that the catenary project that was potentially going to happen there in that area to lower the catenary has been put on hold. Is that true? Do you know if that's true or not? Can certainly ask that question, Angela, but I didn't know if they had, since you're running MARC trains there, I didn't know if you had heard that as well.
I'll have to follow up with you on the specifics of that. We have partnered with Amtrak on catenary replacement throughout the entire kind of Maryland part of the Northeast Corridor, so I don't have the specifics of that area, but I'd be happy to follow up with you.
I would greatly appreciate that, because as you know, there's many moving parts to that project that directly impacts our ability to have a potential future flying mission at the airport there for the National Guard. So I would love to hear kind of what you get on that one.
Yeah, no, happy to follow up. And I do know that the Aviation Administration is involved as
Sure.
well, and like the maintaining the ability to do missions out of there is
Sure.
something that is top of everyone's mind.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So last year, we worked on a bill intended to help protect transit operators from assaults and heard some pretty harrowing testimony. I wondered if you had been tracking that at all and if there's been any improvement.
So on the MTA side, yes, and thank you for passing that bill. We did implement our rider code of conduct and the ability to the rider exclusion policy. Since then, we have proceeded with temporary or permanent exclusion of a number of riders. We've heard positive feedback from operators that they do feel supported by it. In terms of numbers of assaults, the overall numbers have unfortunately not changed. It still averages about 50, 55 per year. The type of assault thankfully has. So we are not seeing like the violent and aggravated assaults that we were previously, but I mean, it doesn't make it better. Getting spit on is just as degrading as some other things. So we're continuing to focus on that. We've got officers who are really focused on doing everything we can. We're following what's happening with the kind of national labor unions about better driver barriers, and we're going to test out those as well on our system.
Thank you very much.
Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our presenters, Mr. Scott, Ms. Arnold, Ms. Gordon. This is probably my favorite briefing of the year. No disrespect to energy, but really excited to hear from you. I'd like to start by commending you both the WMATA system and MTA for the recognition you've received for improvements, the awards and commendations. I hope you feel that as like the incentive to keep working, to know that your efforts really matter. And I also want to let you know that our constituents see the improvements, speaking for MTA specifically, see the improvements and really appreciate them. Just keep going. I'd like to make a quick statement before I ask a question, and my statement is that for those of us representing Baltimore City, the Baltimore City House delegation, we're absolutely committed to seeing the Red Line get built, and I want to say that on the record. I know there are lots of obstacles, and it'll be, a long time coming, but speaking for my delegation, I just want you to know we are behind you, and we look forward to supporting all those efforts to get the biggest and most impactful transit infrastructure project in our state's history built in our lifetimes before we're too old to write it. Okay, questions. And I'll direct my questions for the WMATA administrator already got answered. So my questions for Administrator Arnold and Ms. Gordon. I'm curious to know a little bit more about what happens with the funds that don't get spent. And and forgive me, I'm still learning about the budget. I have colleagues here who know more, but this is just educational. So Ms. Gordon, specifically, you mentioned that the 10-year, well, hang on, that 90% of our state's good repair needs have been met, and that we spent 97% of the capital allocation. But since there's, the MTA budget's pretty big, 97% means 3% is left out, and that's probably a fair amount of money. So what happens to that?
Okay, so the 90% statistic was that our capital needs inventory showed that the current 6-year budget program covers 90%, it has programmed in it 90% of what we need to reduce our state of good repair backlog as showed in the CNI. And then the 97% number was showing what percentage of our allocated funds we spent in fiscal year 25. So it was just one fiscal year as opposed to 6. What happens to the funds that we don't spend is that those, to the extent that those are state funds, not all of them are, some of them are federal funds, right? So to the extent that those are state funds, those are TTF funds, and those are at the discretion of the secretary to direct elsewhere for other things and other expenditures. And then with federal funds, we can often redirect them to other things or claim them in a different year and in a different way, depending on the specifics.
I would say primarily the funds that don't get spent are just rolled over into the future year of the MTA program. So for example, the Metro railcar project a few years ago during COVID, our railcars were the car shells were manufactured in Italy. Obviously, Italy had a lot of issues during COVID, so we didn't spend as much as we thought. The funds stayed with the Metro railcar project. They just pushed out to a later year.
Okay.
But again, our goal is to make sure that we're spending every dollar that's allocated to us so that we can get the system into a state of good repair.
Great, thank you. That's really important because that's what riders really experience. They see that, those investments. Okay, and then I'm curious about the work group on the reorganization of the MTA. And that didn't come up in the presentation. And I realize we could probably do a whole briefing on that. But, or a bill hearing, which is probably coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize that's a signal to not ask this question, but I think my constituents would be curious to know, just in broad terms, what were the key recommendations of the commission that might be of interest to the average Marylander who depends on MTA?
I almost feel like the chair wants to answer that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, are you really telling? I just feel like, okay, thank you,
I guess
Administrator.
I'm not allowed to redirect to the chair. No.
Nice try.
No, I mean, I think the key recommendations coming out of the report were identified a need for governance change at MTA. And so the recommendations are to create a board in the core service area, so Metro, light rail, core bus, and paratransit. And then a separate board or commission, if I get my naming right here, in the commuter area advisory board. Sorry, there's different terms for this. And the commuter area for commuter bus and commuter rail. On the core service side, it would review and approve MTA's budget submission. So kind of as part of the budget submission process, it would have more of a say in that. With the approval of the board, we would hire a separate deputy administrator who would kind of oversee core service. On the commuter side, same thing, except they would review and advise on the budget submission rather than approve. There's also some policies, major policies, service changes that would be approved by the board. And then there's some legislative changes that are recommended to make things easier for MTA, including tort reform, looking at some procurement changes, and then some changes to make it easier for MTA to acquire property for major projects similar to the Red Line.
Right. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I may, if you would indulge me with a final question, and that is to do with the quality of service and the accessibility of service, specifically bus service, in vis-a-vis our school kids in Baltimore City. So you're very familiar with the recent reporting in the Baltimore Banner about students' perceptions of transit quality, transit experience, and how we've seen in some cases, our transit service can affect children's access to education and their educational outcomes. And I was encouraged to see you mention the increased accessibility to students. They can ride MTA anytime. And I wonder to what extent you are working or in communication with the Baltimore City school system to tackle these problems. What is happening now, and what could we do to be more supportive for improved transit service for our kids?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is definitely something that we're really focused on. We have a ton of riders, but those students are one of our most vulnerable populations, and we want to make sure we're spending extra attention there. Over the past couple of years, I want to give actually Livs and her team with service development a ton of credit for the different ways that they've looked to really be creative with how we provide school service. We increased the number of school trippers that we have this past year, and they're piloting kind of after school trippers to allow students to stay after for sports and whatever else they want to do and still have access to the MTA system. That said, it is a bit of like a ball of clay, right? So like you move it in one direction, you have to take it away from somewhere else. So we're doing what we can within the limits of our system. We're working really closely with the school system. We've been in contact with them. We're actually jointly working with Johns Hopkins on a study to take a look at kind of how we're doing school service. Is there something that like we're missing and the schools are missing as part of this? So, we want to make sure that we're improving there. I think in the short term, there are some things that we could have our local jurisdictions do to help improve transit service, including more transit signal priority, making space for transit on city streets with dedicated lanes and dedicated lane enforcement, and bus stop enforcement, kind of all of those things to make sure that people can access the system. And long term, we do see Be More Bus as ultimately the answer to improving kind of frequency overall of the system. And we think there are ways that we can speed that up as well.
Thank you. Thank you for going on that bus tour with me and my colleagues and the high school kids from Digital Harbor. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, thank you all for being here. It's good to be back in ENT and to see you all again. So my question really is you talked a little bit about the electrification of the bus fleet. Can you talk in more detail about what is the total number of buses? How many do you have deployed? and I know you had mentioned some that were on order, and really what I'd like to hear in all that is, how is it going, especially with the super cold temperatures? How are they affecting deployment and operations? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So on the MTA side, we ordered 7 electric buses in 2024. Those were in service. We have more coming in 2025. I believe the first few are on site. I know at least a couple of them are in service now. And then we've got 10 more that are coming in the 26 and 27 order. So we're continuing to kind of slowly increase the size of the fleet. Unfortunately, the 2024 buses, there was a battery issue, so those are kind of grounded right now. They're sitting in a parking lot while we work with the manufacturer to implement a fix, and we'll get them back out there. The newest buses that we got in are in service right now and actually have been doing fantastic. There's been, even with the extreme cold, the good feedback from the operators, good feedback from the maintenance team, so we've been impressed there. We're also focused on the charging infrastructure. So right now we have charging infrastructure at one of our bus facilities, and we're working to advance adding it at a second bus facility so that we have more flexibility with that. Overall, I think we're continuing to look at what the industry is doing, where it's going. I will say with the change in the federal administration, there's definitely less focus on electrification, and so that's one of the things that we're monitoring as we look at the program going forward. And I know WMATA also has electric buses, so you may want to chime in.
Sure. Right now, I think MTA, Montgomery County Ride-On have more experience than we do. We do have a couple buses that we are testing. We have our northern bus garage will be an electric facility, but as Administrator Arnold mentioned, we are also watching what's happening in the industry. So for instance, our project at Cinderbed Road in Virginia, we have moved away from electrification, actually on that bus division, just recognizing that we think that the industry still needs to evolve before we can lean in more heavily on going electric. But it is something that our board is interested in seeing us pursue, and I think they also understand and recognize some of the challenges in the industry right now.
And what performances have you seen?
I don't have metrics on the performance, but again, we only have a couple that we've been testing. So, but I can ask the team and get back to you.
Yeah, on the MTA side, performance-wise, we've seen about what we expected, in some cases slightly better than what we expected. The routes that are kind of shorter, pull in, pull out from some of our divisions, we think we can cover. Some of the longer routes are the ones that we think the charge still isn't quite where it needs to be, and that's why monitoring what the industry is doing and the advances that it's making will be really critical as we move forward.
When you talk about those advances, are you talking about dependability or range? Is there a big significant, 24 and 25, are you getting more range, more
Yeah, so the newer buses, we're definitely getting more range, they're more dependable, we're having kind of less issues with them. So, every year the technology continues to improve and get better, and so we want to see where that's going, and will it get us to the point where we think we could handle all the routes with that technology.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up Delegate Lewis's comment about the red line, could Administrator Arnold, could you give us an update on planning for the red line?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, echoing Delegate Lewis's comments, definitely a very needed, important project across the entire region. Improving the reliability of getting east to west is crucial, and so we're dedicated to moving that forward. We do have funding in the budget for the project development of the project, and so we've been continuing to advance that and make sure that we've got a really solid project that's ready to go. Obviously, there have been some changes to the federal capital investment grant program and the priorities of the federal administration. So we're taking a really hard look at kind of all the options available for the project and how we can best move it forward as quickly as possible.
Okay, if I could follow up, Mr. Chairman. And as you come to further decisions or recommendations about further funding for the project, if you could keep us posted, appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is going to take partnership, and so we want to make sure that we're working closely with the General Assembly and with the communities that are most impacted as we make any sort of decisions.
Thank you.
Okay, I do not see any other questions for this panel, so thank you all so much. Appreciate you being here. We're going to turn right over for an update on Vision Zero, which is our state statutory and aspirational goal for zero fatalities and serious injuries, on state roads by 2030. We have representatives from the Motor Vehicle Administration, State Highway, and I think both the Maryland Association of Counties and Maryland Municipal League, but I know folks were juggling a few different hearings, so we might just have one of those acronyms with us. But with that, let me turn it over to our state partners. Please go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Chrissy Nizer, Motor Vehicle Administrator, and Governor Moore's Highway Safety Representative. I'm excited to be here today talking about Vision Zero and where the state is going in terms of saving lives on our roadways. As the chairman said, not only is it something we're committed to because it's the right thing to do, but it also is something that you've legislatively mandated in terms of reaching zero fatalities by 2030. We are approaching this from a multi-solution perspective and certainly data-driven. I'll get into the data today, which we do have some good news to share with you. Our Highway Safety Office that works within the Motor Vehicle Administration is certainly focused in coordinating with all of our partners, both at the state as well as the local level, so that we're really applying the best of multifaceted solutions to address the challenges. I do have our Deputy Director, Meyer Weeman, here, and I just want to acknowledge the hard work. These folks every day are focused on how do we eliminate these horrible fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway. We also have great educational campaigns like Be the Driver to try to encourage and influence behavior. So we'll just start off with the good news, which is that we have announced today, Governor Moore announced that we're 18% fewer fatalities on our roadways in Maryland than the prior year. You can see post-COVID, we all know during those COVID years we saw impacts on our highways in terms of traffic fatalities. Those numbers are declining, and that sharp decline last year to 480. It is the first year since 2014 that we've experienced lower than 500 fatalities, and it now ranks as the fourth lowest number of fatalities. Obviously, I will say these are preliminary data, subject to change, but we feel pretty good at this point in early February where the numbers are. I do want to just pause and say, these are not just numbers, these are people, and we take that very seriously. And in my role, I have the honor, and I truly do believe it's an honor to meet these families. They're impacted forever, and that's a responsibility that I take very seriously in my job. The other good news in the data, if you can see that 33% reduction, that's our vulnerable roadway users. And I will say that's something that we've spent a lot of time and focus as a department on. I know from an engineering perspective as well as our educational perspective. Down 33% is significant. Our vulnerable roadway users generally range between 20 and 25% of our fatalities, which is a pretty big percentage. So to see that reduction in particular in that area is definitely something that we're proud of. We remember all those victims, certainly, and maybe you saw that wreath as you walked in the door, and that was just another way to acknowledge them and keep their memories alive. So in terms of our strategic highway safety plan, this is something that is required of every state that we are required to submit to the federal government. We did just finalize and submit to Federal Highway Administration our next version of our plan. Certainly the numbers that I just showed demonstrate progress, but not victory. Moving in the right direction and building on that with our new strategic highway safety plan. Again, the data is at the center of all we do in terms of the investments that we make, but making sure that we are working together in a collaborative way and bringing all the partners to the table as we're looking at the causes of these fatalities and really working on innovative solutions. The Department of Transportation has adopted a Serious About Safety campaign, which is an umbrella campaign that all of these various initiatives are falling underneath of. So I know we've talked in prior years about, what coordination looks like, and we have really put a big emphasis on creating local strategic highway safety plans that also emphasize what's going on at the local level, because it's not just enough to have a statewide plan. And so you can see where we are in terms of the implemented counties and municipalities, really bringing those coalitions together at the local level, because often the data looks a little different at the local level than it does at the statewide level, and bringing those partners to the table, have those conversations, coming up with the solutions is really critical, we believe, to making a difference. But I know when I've been here in the past, the question has been, where are we kind of in process? So there's a lot of jurisdictions that are still having the conversations statewide with us about how they move forward at the local level. So both in process expressed on this chart, as well as those who have are in the talking phases. I think statewide, there's a recognition that we want to come together and address things in a different way than maybe they've been addressed in the past and figure out innovative solutions to reach our goals of 0 fatalities. Wanted to talk a little bit about the funding program that we have through the Maryland Highway Safety Office. This is behavioral funding, so not the engineering funding that my colleague will talk about in terms of his portfolio, but last year we obligated over $12 million. This funding opportunity is available now. So if you have folks at the local level, we're always looking for new partners. This gives you a sense of some of the things we're spending the money on. And we really do try to have the data drive those decisions. When it comes to law enforcement, we're making direct allocations in terms of grant funding, in terms of what's needed. Is it impaired driving? Is it issues related to speed? What are the challenges? And therefore, how do we make the investments? So this gives you a bit of a sense of how that funding is divided, really, again, to try to help us reach the goals. Want to touch a little bit on our Vision Zero quarterly meetings. Again, this was something that was enacted into law, and we've been meeting since December of 2024. These are quarterly meetings, and they are available. We live stream those, and then you can go to our 0-md.gov website to find recordings of those meetings. So every meeting we start and we do kind of a review of the stats as we did today. We go into a little bit more detail with our safety partners all sitting around the table. And then we work collaboratively with our infrastructure partners to do that review of the fatal and serious injury crashes and impacting our system. And it's a great collaborative conversation. It has evolved. I think even over the few meetings that we've had, we talk about each crash, what happened, what could have prevented it, is there an infrastructure change we need to make? If there's a bus stop in the area, do we need to talk about that location of the bus stop? Do we need to, ultimately in the conversations we realized we need to bring the local jurisdictions in. So that's a new addition for the last 2 meetings. We've invited, since it's online, the local jurisdictions to join us as we're talking about crashes in that area. Not only so they can be aware of the discussion, but frankly, they can add information that we might not be aware of at the statewide level that they're aware of. So again, having those conversations in a holistic way so that we can prevent these crashes, hopefully from happening going forward. I think it's really an ongoing conversation. When there's questions that can't be answered at the table, those come back in subsequent meetings before the board actually approves the crashes and the analysis as has been completed. So really appreciate the legislature and your thoughtfulness. I know the chair is an avid listener to the meetings and provides feedback, which I appreciate, frankly. It is helpful as we try to make this a useful structure, not just to review the crashes, but really to make meaningful changes moving forward. So now I'm going to shift the topic a little bit to talk about automated traffic enforcement and the role that MBA plays there. We know that automated traffic and speed enforcement in particular does play a major role in terms of helping us reduce those fatalities on our roadways, especially if we think about those critical areas, our work zones, our school zones, and other areas where there's excessive speeds. We know speed is linked to more significant injuries and ultimately fatalities, and so really our focus is on safety. And so as we think about MBA's role there, every day more than 100 flagging jurisdictions can submit requests to MBA for unresolved automated traffic enforcement citations. That ranges from speed, red light violations, tolls, parking, school bus, bus lane, noise, and stop sign infractions. MBA is a partner to those jurisdictions by ensuring that outstanding violations, those that have not been paid, are addressed before they can complete certain motor vehicle transactions. The idea is that that enforces the accountability for the violations to ensure that the individual is taking care of those. To expand a little bit on the role, so the jurisdiction is still always communicating to the customer first. That is how the process should work. They provide that initial notification. And then once we get that flag from the jurisdiction electronically communicated to us, we notify the customer right away, so they're not surprised when the vehicle registration comes up for renewal. There is an administrative flag fee. You can see that $30 fee that's required to be paid to MBA, and then the customer is not able to renew their registration until that is addressed. MBA does have the authority to suspend for MDTA toll violations that reach a certain level, again, only after that formal process occurs. While we do collect that administrative fee, the citation revenue itself is deposited in the Transportation Trust Fund, obviously supporting all the projects talked about earlier and all the other projects that are done through the TTF. So importantly, I think what the MBA doesn't do related to automated enforcement, as I said, we only get those unpaid citations. We do not get ones that are properly paid. So when they are resolved with the jurisdiction directly before the time elapsed, then that is not something that we are aware of. Additionally, I want to be clear that those are civil violations. They're not criminal violations. They are different from violations that you get that go on your driving record, that have points associated with them, and again, fines there as well. As a result, there are situations where the vehicle owner is penalized, even if they're not driving. I know we've run into those situations before, maybe loaning a car out, weren't aware that a child was driving somewhere, and it winds up with one of those violations in the mail. MBA certainly supports efforts to standardize the process of collecting the data and ensuring especially that customers are properly notified, as well as educated on the impact of those violations. And so just talking a little bit about the notification process, because I know that question comes up a lot. If the jurisdiction sends new flag notices to the MBA, we communicate to the customer either by email or mail, along with notifying them about a new notice. We also tell them about any other prior flags that they might have on their record, just so that they have that information available. You can see the timeframes at which a customer is notified. Again, as that vehicle registration renewal is approaching, we're going to let you know, because that will stop the customer from being able to renew their registration. It is sometimes confusing to customers that they have to pay the administrative fee to the MBA and they have to pay the jurisdiction, the citation amount, in order to move forward with that registration renewal. Just want to take a brief moment and touch on some of our departmental bills. The ignition interlock participation will be before judiciary and not this committee, but just for your awareness. It allows additional individuals to opt into the program, applying a provision for those over 21 that currently exists for those under 21. This is at the administrative hearing process. There is a departmental bill on automated enforcement reciprocity. This would give the department the authority to enter into agreements on reciprocity related to automated enforcement that, again, would be tied to that registration, as we talked about earlier with the flags. The other departmentals, sorry, I must have pushed through them. The other departmentals you'll hear before the committee, and so one is the photo requirement on the driver's license, and the other one is related to our process with exchanging a vehicle, private sale with a vehicle, and so we'll have those bill hearings going forward, but I did want to note them as I'm in front of you. So I know there's a lot to get to today. Happy to answer any questions, if the chair would like to do it now or after the other presenters. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Administrator Neiser. Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and other members of the committee. For the record, I'm Will Pine, State Highway Administrator, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you today to talk about SHA's efforts towards meeting our Vision Zero goal, as well as our work zone safety program, what's known as the Safe Zones program. Get my slides up here. So SHA is serious about safety. As Administrator Neiser mentioned, we work together on a lot of efforts with that, and we're committed to meeting Maryland's Vision Zero goal. We're implementing several critical safety programs to bend the curve towards zero, and this aligns with SHA's strategic plan, which is focused on growing our culture of safety throughout the agency. This includes a suite of safety-focused programs and initiatives like the implementation of MDOT's updated Complete Streets policy the SHA Context-Driven Initiative, the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or what we refer to as the PSAP. You'll hear me say that a couple times today. The Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment and the corresponding projects, as well as multiple other safety-focused projects and initiatives. SHA is actively taking a role in leading the implementation on the MDOT Complete Streets policy. While SHA has always had a Complete Streets policy, the new department-wide policy initiative brings Complete Streets right to the forefront of our work so that our engineers, planners, and design teams are scoping out projects at the very beginning through the lens of Complete Streets. We've been focused and working very hard on updating the design guidelines and policy documents that are aligned with the Complete Streets policy. This includes completing updates to documents like our recently published ADA Transition Plan, SHA's Rec Trails Manual, the Transportation Alternatives or the TAP Program Manual, and also SHA's Accessible Pedestrian Signal Policy. The team is also actively working on updates to manuals like our Traffic Impact Study Guidelines, the SHA Access Manual, the Context-Driven Guide, and more of those other types of documents that align with the Complete Streets policy. Thanks to Governor Moore and the work of the Maryland General Assembly during the 2025 session, we also were able to secure funding to advance critical safety projects that help to meet and fulfill that Complete Streets lens. Today, 83% of SHA's budget goes towards meeting safety and system preservation needs statewide. However, we also recognize there are many more needs than our funds are able to support. We've also launched the Context-Driven Initiative back in 2020, moving from a one-size-fits-all set of standards towards context-sensitive improvements. This includes updating the Context-Driven Guide, which provides a multimodal framework that's appropriate based on each context zone. The guide identifies 6 separate contexts that range from urban core areas to rural areas. And the Context-Driven Guide is currently being updated to bring it into better alignment with the Complete Streets policy. As part of that, our Context-Driven Toolkit is also a supplemental tool that helps our planners and engineers determine the countermeasures that are best suited for the land use needs. For all of our safety-focused projects, SHA considers a full menu of what's called proven safety countermeasures that can be implemented to enhance safety for all highway users, including vulnerable road users. The Federal Highway Administration also publishes approved proven safety countermeasures that SHA considers, and those are things such as speed safety cameras, roundabouts, and other solutions that aid in improving safety. These countermeasures are proven to be effective using science-based research that show that the traffic safety countermeasures will address highway safety for problem areas. However, we are also testing and evaluating the effectiveness of new and innovative low-cost countermeasures through our quick build projects, which many of you have probably seen in some of your areas. As the context guide is updated, we will integrate Federal Highway's approved solutions into our context toolkit. And throughout our various safety programs and projects, you can expect to see countermeasures that are contextually appropriate, like lane width and speed limit reductions to reduce the vehicular speeds on roadways, continental crosswalks, mid-block crossings, leading pedestrian intervals, and curb extensions that will help to protect pedestrians. Additionally, for bicyclists, we've put in green pavement for those bike lanes, bike lane signals, and extensions to support the mobility for cyclists. And in the spirit of context-driven, we're also using proven safety countermeasures that prevent motorist deaths on more suburban and rural roads like rumble strips, mumble strips, wider edge lines, and signal retroflective backplates. You've again heard me talk about PSAP for the last several years. I'm happy to report that we're making substantial progress on these projects. the PSAP is one of SHA's most important safety programs as it will address the critical safety and mobility needs for vulnerable road users on Maryland highways statewide. PSAP projects are safety-focused. They're near or midterm improvements that make substantial safety improvements while minimizing the right-of-way needs and impacts to utilities that help us to keep those projects at a lower cost rather than some more extensive enhancements. SHA recognizes the criticality of addressing safety needs now, so focusing PSAP efforts on safety is really important. And while other non-safety features and more impactful construction may be desirable, we simply cannot wait for 10 to 15 years for our projects to be able to advance. We must prioritize safety improvements across our system with urgency because we have so many statewide needs and must save lives today. Through the PSAP program, our goal is to make impactful improvements to safety through strategic and context-focused implementation of engineering transportation solutions. So what is PSAP? We started our construction on our first PSAP project, Maryland 650 in Prince George's and Montgomery counties, in July of 2025. That is frankly one of the fastest projects we've ever delivered at State Highway. And for perspective, this corridor has a fatal crash rate per mile that's nearly 12 times higher than the statewide average. Furthermore, the round 1 and 2 PSAP corridors experienced 31 fatal crashes and 67 serious injury crashes during the 4-year PSAP assessment period. Quite frankly, these are very dangerous corridors throughout Maryland. We're actively moving forward with the final design of safety improvements along Maryland 150 in Baltimore County, Maryland 2 in Anne Arundel County, Maryland 410 in Prince George's County, and US 1 in Howard County as part of our first round of PSAP projects. The second round of PSAP projects are in the early design phase, with improvements slated for various corridors across the state from US 40 in Washington County to Maryland 528 in Worcester County. We anticipate 7 PSAP projects will advertise in fiscal year 2027, and the next round of PSAP corridors will be announced next week. Similar to our PSAP program, the Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment is another data-driven evaluation tool that the state has to help us identify critical safety corridors. The Federal Highway Administration requires that each state complete that VRU safety assessment, and states are required to integrate the assessments into the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which Administrator Neiser mentioned during her remarks. SHA published the first VRU assessment in 2023 and recently updated the assessment in 2025 in conjunction with the MVA, update to the highway plan, as I noted. The plan is currently under review by Federal Highway following a significant public engagement process. We identified 135 corridors, which included the original 23 PSAP corridors, as areas of serious safety needs. These corridors were selected utilizing a robust data collection, prioritization, and public engagement process. To effectively manage and sustainably fund safety improvements for these locations, we followed the same structure of project delivery as PSAP projects, delivering groups of projects into rounds. Round 1 of our VRU projects are currently in design and include segments in Maryland 213 in Cecil County, 542 in Baltimore County, and Maryland 12 in Wicomico County. Round 2 of the VRU projects are also in the early stages of design and include segments like US 11 in Washington County and Maryland 202 in Prince George's County. Between PSAP and VRU programs, we have a significant shelf of projects that are advancing to efficiently spread the work amongst our engineering teams and establish district safety projects that also enable our district local staff to fully develop and implement safety improvement projects that are also along those same PSAP and VRU corridors. These projects were broken out from our PSAP projects because we have more to do in those corridors that's already underway, but where other projects were already there, they needed to be interfaced with each other appropriately. And so those projects helped to fill in gaps and countermeasures where improvements were there. Round one of these breakout projects included 3 projects in Baltimore County, Maryland 700, Maryland 26, and Maryland 140, as well as Maryland 414 in Prince George's County and Maryland 124 in Montgomery County. All of these projects are currently in design. For the past 2 years, SHA has also implemented quick build program projects that enables us to pilot countermeasures to test innovative products and solutions. Additionally, since 2024, SHA invested in our statewide crosswalk initiative. The team has completed inspections and developed an inventory of crosswalks statewide, which allows SHA to better maintain our assets. Over fiscal year 24 and 25, we've upgraded 1,902 crosswalks at 859 intersections to high visibility continental crosswalks across the state. Finally, following every tragic pedestrian and bicycle fatality on the state roadway, our team conducts an infrastructure review of the location to determine if additional infrastructure improvements or enhancements are necessary and recommends potential improvements for implementation if appropriate, as again, Administrator Neiser mentioned. These are reviewed and discussed at the Vision Zero Commission meetings. And as you can see, SHA is working hard to advance engineering and infrastructure improvements on our roadway system that supports Maryland's Vision Zero goals. While we make all possible attempts to design and build safe roadways for our users, we recognize that driver behavior, especially speeding, is harmful, and we really are leading and contributing to those speeders are leading and contributing to the fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway network. Thanks to Governor Moore and the Lieutenant Governor's leadership, SHA has made strides in improving safety on our roadway for our roadway workers and those traveling throughout our work zones. SHA has made considerable progress implementing the recommendations of the Governor's Work Zone Safety Group, which included updating our traffic control standards, improving work zone safety trainings, and increasing the deployments statewide. To further improve safety in work zones, SHA has leveraged automated speed enforcement to slow down vehicles traveling through our work zone, and we use that automated enforcement in work zones starting back in 2009, and that became fully operational in our system in 2010. As you know, the Maryland General Assembly passed the Road Worker Protection Act in 2024, which amended the work zone camera program, creating a new tiered penalty structure and included new requirements such as additional signing, flashing lights, and authorized use of unmanned cameras. The tiered fine structure corresponds with the range of speed as the motorist is traveling in excess of the speed limit at the time they're cited, and also varies depending on whether or not workers are present or not. The new law also changed how the revenues generated by the work zone cameras were distributed after administrative costs are covered. MSP, or the Maryland State Police, receives 25% of the excess revenues, and the remaining 75% goes to the Transportation Trust Fund for highway safety and system preservation needs like those PSAP projects that I mentioned. On the screen, I have some of the citation data associated with the work zone program. Since implementation of the tiered fine structure in January of 2025, the Safe Zones program has observed a 17% decrease in the number of citations issued versus what was issued in 2024. This is relevant too because we've actually increased the number of camera deployments statewide. This shows that motorists are slowing down in work zones to avoid the fines. However, while the citations are down year over year, we know that some drivers' behaviors continue to be a problem. In 2025, there were 19 captured occurrences where vehicles were traveling over 130 miles an hour in work zones in Maryland. From our perspective, that is totally unacceptable. Similarly to the citation data, we've also seen a reduction in work zone crashes since the implementation of the Road Worker Protection Act. In 2024, there were 1,301 versus in 2025, there were 1,146 crashes in work zones. That's an almost 12% decrease. These initial observations are positive and align with evidence-based research, which demonstrates that speed cameras are effective at saving lives. However, we recognize that longer evaluation periods are necessary to draw deeper conclusions about the recent and upcoming changes. Administrator Neiser talked about some of the safety legislation in her packages. You will see a bill that we are putting forward, House Bill 256, that, as you saw in the work zone data, speed cameras we know are effective at reducing speeds, reducing crashes, and saving lives. That's why this year MDOT has introduced the Vulnerable Road User Safety Act of 2026. This bill demonstrates that we're serious about safety on Maryland roadways. The bill will authorize SHA or local jurisdictions with existing enabling legislation to use speed monitoring systems on corridors identified in the Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessments. With this authorization, SHA will have another tool in the toolbox and be able to add proven safety countermeasures along with the potential of other suite of improvements to our VRU projects throughout Maryland. Additionally, last session, two other bills passed. The Maryland General Assembly provided SHA with enabling authority to operate automated speed enforcement on I-695 in Baltimore County and I-83 in Baltimore County, as well as the inter-county connector in Montgomery County. SHA is actively working on the procurement that will provide the resources necessary to support these new programs, and which are anticipated to be operational in 2027. And in closing, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present to you all the great work that we're doing at State Highway to promote safety statewide, and I'll turn it over to our other speaker.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Bill George, I'm the Managing Director at the Maryland Municipal League. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm going to focus on some of the automated traffic enforcement that's going on at our municipal level. So of the 9 types of automated traffic enforcement that are authorized in the state, by far the one that is most utilized by our municipal members is speed cameras in school zones statewide, as well as residential zones in 3 counties, plus Tacoma Park, plus part of Baltimore City. Currently, 52 municipalities utilize speed cameras, and that's across 15 different counties. So 52 is about a third of the MML membership. There's about 300 total cameras in use by municipalities statewide. Most cities are using 5 or fewer. Geographically, this covers from Washington County to Calvert and Charles, Cecil, and most of the Eastern Shore, and everywhere in between. For a little bit of perspective, the 12 most populous municipalities use speed cameras, as well as 3 that have under 1,000 person population. So it's really not geared towards any certain population size. This also includes a few municipalities that do not have police departments, and that for the current reporting period, those municipalities needed to contract with another law enforcement agency to do the review of the images and issue the citations. But thanks to a General Assembly passed law last year, those municipalities and others now have the opportunity to use a trained civilian technician as opposed to a law enforcement officer to do the review. As you know, revenue must be used for public safety or traffic-related purposes. A few examples in the most recent reporting period: this is patrol vehicles, public safety, vehicle repair, body camera equipment, community safety education, sidewalk repair, crossing guards, and officer training. I'd also like to touch on briefly the stop sign camera program recently authorized for Prince George's County. About 10 municipalities in Prince George's County have this up and running or will in the very near future. Here's some preliminary data from Berwyn Heights, which has had cameras operational since March of 2025, and the reporting data is through the end of last year, so about 8 or 9 months worth of data. By the end of the year, they had 2 cameras up. One camera saw a 65% reduction in violations captured. The other was over a 70% reduction. What's interesting about this law is that municipalities have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to setting the parameters for when the camera snaps a photo of a potential violation. As a result, Berwyn Heights used some of the revenue, which again is restricted towards public safety and pedestrian safety use, to install speed bumps on some roads, repainting road markers, and even giant letters in the roadways that say stop or slow down. It's interesting, those need to be placed in school zones as well, similar to some of the speed camera parameters. But school zones are not just a boundary within which municipalities can place speed cameras. They also allow municipalities to drop the speed limit on some of those roadways, which is an important differentiator for those during school hours. And I just want to be real clear about the local government role in the rollout of these automated traffic enforcement programs, and that is that there's a fair amount of local responsibility. In the statute, it says that local governments cannot use automated traffic enforcement devices unless it's approved by the council after reasonable notice and public hearings, and that before any cameras go into use, the local government must publish the locations of the cameras and install signage on the roadways indicating that cameras are in use. This is not just someone from the city who's out wandering around placing speed cameras up on streets willy-nilly. This is a fully vetted, public, transparent process. So, a few asks of you before I go as you consider automated traffic enforcement legislation this year. One is to take the bill from last year that allowed trained technicians to review speed camera images and issue citations and apply those to the other automated traffic enforcement devices as well. Next is local flexibility and authority. Authorizing statewide use of automated traffic enforcement devices. We'll see a bill from Vice Chair Guyton in a few days expanding residential use of speed cameras to statewide. Something like this allows the local governments to decide when and where, if at all, these devices are appropriate, again, using the statutorily required public hearing process to make that decision. And lastly is enforcement. Administrator Neiser touched on this a little bit. Out-of-state violators of automated traffic enforcement. The proximity of so much of our state to boundaries with other states. We see, I hear reports from our members of a lot of out-of-state drivers being caught on speed cameras in their jurisdiction, red light cameras, the like. Tracking those vehicle owners down and recouping those fines can prove very difficult, and in doing so, it borderline encourages them to continue the bad behavior going forward if they know there's no consequence of ever having to pay those fines. Reciprocity agreements are really, really important to help local governments enforce the rules that are on the books and protect their vulnerable road users. With that, I've come to the end of my conclusion remarks, and thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. I think the Maryland Association of Counties snuck in while you were talking, so why don't you come on up, and while you're doing that, let me thank your jurisdictions and, of course, our state partners for what you're doing to keep people safe and moving, and I use people specifically. The drivers are important, the passengers are important, the pedestrians are important, the cyclists are important. It's about people, not just cars. And let me make sure Mako's mic is also lit up.
Hello.
He's going to have to go do it. I'm encouraging him to move quickly.
I can start. My name is Sarah Sample. I'm here with the Maryland Association of Counties, and I cover public safety and corrections, but also government liability and courts, which helps me come into this, this policy area for automated enforcement. So what I'd like to share with you all today is really just sort of what implementation looks like in the jurisdictions as far as the extent of it and some of the trends that we're seeing in the enforcement, and then also what are a few requests that our jurisdictions have shared with us that would be useful. So as far as extent of implementation, I just want to share with you how many counties have implemented certain types of cameras. I would start with the external school bus camera. That is by far the most widely adopted. We have 13 jurisdictions that have those cameras. I believe there are 2 more jurisdictions that have authorizations pending. So that's sort of the number one. The next one is going to be our speed cameras that are in school zones. We're looking at about 9 jurisdictions that have those. And then the next authorization is red light cameras, and that drops down to 2 jurisdictions. As far as transit enforcement, we have a lot of data that is submitted that has to do with the speed cameras specifically. These reports are on the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission website, and a lot of information is required. It's like the number of citations, how many were erroneous, what the rev share looks like with your vendor, what you spend the money on. So we have a lot of that information that you guys can delve into as well. But one of the main things that I did in preparing for this presentation today was I wanted to look at that and see what the year-over-year data told us to just confirm that we are actually seeing behavior change. And what we do see is that citations and fines are decreasing, and these areas are becoming safer, and the revenue that is collected ends up going down over time. And I will point out that if you look at those reports, you will sometimes see the revenue go up year over year, and a lot of times that has to do with adding an additional camera or potentially moving a camera to an area where you see a lot of violations. So you won't see it going down all the time, but there are certain reasons why sometimes it goes up. As far as the number of speed cameras per jurisdiction, I would say for a medium jurisdiction, we've got about 5 to 9 cameras. And then when you get into the larger jurisdictions, it can range from 20 to 30. And then when you get into more urban jurisdictions, we're looking at more in the range of 50 plus. I also have a spreadsheet that I created for Senator Sidner a couple years ago, that when it comes to the authorizations of these speed cameras, it's basically showing you what the local enacting ordinance is. It gives you a GIS map of where all those cameras are located, and you can drill down to what school it's associated with. So I've got that spreadsheet if anybody on this committee would like to see it. And then effectiveness, I mean, we're seeing a decrease in crashes and incidences, specifically when it comes to an individual who is getting killed or seriously injured, and when it comes to chronic violations going down. So the scope of that impact is variable, but a very conservative number that I have is we're seeing it go down 20 to 30%, which I think is meaningful, particularly because that is a conservative estimate. All right, as far as our requests, and that was something when we did our interim briefing on this topic, we were asked to bring requests, so I wanted to share that. But so mainly they're in 3 areas: flexibility with our existing authorization, new local authorizations, and then new state tools, which I believe you've probably already heard a little bit from some of the other panel members that are here. As far as the first 2 for flexibility, one has to do with funding uses. I'm going to hold my breath when I say this, but I don't think it's a mystery that counties are losing a lot of their financial self-determination when it comes to unfunded mandates and increasingly more cost shifts that are coming our way. And so some jurisdictions have requested a little bit more flexibility in terms of how funds get used. Right now, it's mainly public safety, and the main request we've heard is for things that are more infrastructure related that might not necessarily be specific to pedestrian safety. Maybe it's engineering and planning costs. So that was something that came up in terms of flexibility with the funding. Another one is very specific to school zones and wanting more context-specific school zone radiuses. So this would be very targeted, but what we found is that there are certain areas where you have a school that has multiple campuses, and sometimes that reaches outside of that 0.5 mile radius. And the other thing that comes up similar to this is that sometimes you have a school where the after-school pathways or after-school activities, things like going to the fields and different facilities for stuff, also falls out of the 0.5 mile radius. But we do see lots of children, lots of families that are continually going through those pathways. So those are the 2 things in terms of flexibility. As far as new local authorization, it would really just be expanding statewide a few of the things that we already have. So stop sign cameras, but then also statewide authority for residential speed cameras, just to sort of ease that process so we don't have to have a delegation bill to get those done. And as far as the why for that, we're getting a lot of requests from residents specifically for those types of things. And then the new tools for the state that would also be useful for us, surrounding state reciprocity. I won't dive into that too much, but it really will help with out-of-state compliance and safety and accountability in certain areas. The safety corridors is also another thing, a new state tool that we could also utilize as well to help with enforcement there. And then approvals for red light cameras on state highways. We had gotten some feedback that some requests were getting turned down or not getting responded to. And what we were wondering about is there potential to have sort of an appeals process or the ability to have, to require the state put a camera in one of those locations. Pretty much that's it. I mean, I would just say that the data shows that we're changing behavior. It's making these areas safer. It's minimizing law enforcement interactions with individuals and freeing up those law enforcement officers to be doing things that really demand an in-person component. So that is the extent of my remarks, and thank you so much for having me.
Terrific. Thank you very much. As I throw it open to my colleagues, just a reminder, we have 7 bills and 41 witnesses after this. Delegate Lewis.
Message received, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. It's really inspiring to hear about the holistic approach to safety, road safety for everyone. Appreciate you, Secretary Neiser, Secretary Pine, and our county and municipal colleagues. My question is, how are we doing with, hang on, let me go back to my question, because I took so many notes, because you guys had so much good stuff to say. I believe it was Secretary Neiser, no, sorry, it was Administrator Pines who referred to your budget. You said that 83% of the budget is for safety and system preservation needs. Is that like a historical amount? Is it more than the past? Less than you need? Why was it important to tell us that unless you need something, I guess?
It's just showing the emphasis on safety statewide. I talked about in my remarks that, and thank you for the question. My comment was really just to emphasize our seriousness about safety, that so much of our funding is going towards safety. I do think that we are making historic investments in vulnerable road user safety and other safety investments that have sort of bred out of that pedestrian safety action plan that I talked about. But my remarks are really just to emphasize that it is a significant portion of our budget that's focused on maintaining the assets that we have and keeping them safe, and also making safety improvements on our roadways.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, panel, great to see everyone. Administrator Pines, this one's for you. First of all, I appreciate our relationship. We text a lot, and I greatly appreciate that. And I wanted to also say what a great job SHA has done over the past week or so, 10 days, with clearing the roads. My commute has been very smooth. You all have done a great job on that, so thank you for that. I have one question about a corridor in Baltimore County. It's roughly between Middle River Road and the Harford County line on US 40. You guys have done awesome work on 150. Thank you for that, the pedestrian work. This is another area where there have been some fatalities over the past several years. I know the county has included it in some of their documentation over the past couple of years with their CTP requests. So I'm just curious if that is anywhere in the discussion, in the queue of other rounds, or what may be able to be done there. Maybe it's also a question for Administrator Neiser. I don't know what we can do there, but I would love some conversation on that part of the road in Baltimore County as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I highlighted a lot of the great PSAP and VRU corridor work that we're doing. But as I mentioned, the Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment has 135 corridors statewide. So we do not have funding to address issues that are there at all of the locations. Based on the most recent VRU assessment, there were 4 corridors within Baltimore and Harford County on US 40 specifically that were identified as high-risk corridors. So we do have one of those in the first round PSAP in Harford County, up in the Aberdeen area. We're working in other areas to, as I mentioned, next week we're going to announce the next round. We're packaging that information together now. But I'm happy to work with you, particularly if there's specific areas of concern. We might be able to do a quick build project, and certainly the community feedback is important in our prioritization of these locations as well. We want to make sure that we're seeing connectivity needs and other things beyond just the safety stats.
That's great, thank you. I'm sorry, Administrator, didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I think it's a great question, and I would just add in, but from a behavioral standpoint, we're happy to bring the locals together. I know around those Route 40 intersections in particular, we see a lot of pedestrians in areas that you would not anticipate a pedestrian being in. As we know, those are high rate of speed highways with separated barriers. So it's often a conversation we're having with the locals, and so happy to engage with the SHA administrator and see if we can attack it from multiple perspectives.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I know you know that area well, so thank you. I know you both know that area well, so thank you for that. And yeah, I would love to follow up offline on that. Thank you.
And thanks for the snow compliment. It was a lot of work, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate it. Colleagues, we are going to take sort of a 3-minute break while the system resets for our bill hearing, so please don't go far.